Hey there, friend. Welcome to this quiet corner of history, where we let the ancient world wash over us like warm water on tired feet. Whether you're settling in for the evening or finding yourself restless in the small hours, I'm glad you've joined me tonight. Before we begin our gentle journey back through time, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and tell me what city or country you're in and what time it is as you press play. There's something wonderfully connecting about knowing we're all scattered across the globe, yet here together, drifting through the same ancient stories. If this kind of peaceful historical storytelling helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you some calm. We have many more quiet explorations ahead of us. Now settle in. Pull your blankets a little closer, let your breathing slow, and prepare to step back nearly 4,000 years. Tonight, we're going to explore something that might make you grateful for your morning shower, your scented soap, your soft towels. We're diving into what hygiene was like in Bible times. But this isn't the sanitized version you might expect. This isn't about ceremonial washing or ritual purity, though those existed too. This is about the daily reality of staying clean when running water was a luxury, when soap as we know it didn't exist, when a hot bath was something only the wealthy could dream of, and when the very act of staying fresh in the desert heat was a constant, exhausting battle. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the modern world fade away. No more tile bathrooms, no more hot water heaters, no more drugstore aisles lined with shampoos and lotions. Instead, picture dusty roads, oil lamps flickering in stone houses, and the sound of water being drawn from wells by hand, bucket by precious bucket. You're waking up in ancient Palestine around 1000 BCE. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the air is already warm, carrying the scent of dried herbs, wood smoke, and something else, something earthier. The smell of humanity living close together, working hard, and making do with very little water. This is the world of David and Solomon, of Ruth and Esther, of countless unnamed people whose daily struggles with cleanliness would make our modern complaints about bad hair days seem almost comically trivial. Because in Bible times, hygiene wasn't just about feeling fresh or looking good. It was about survival, about health, about social acceptance, and sometimes about life and death itself. Let's begin with water, shall we? Because everything about cleanliness in the ancient world started with water, and water, my friend, was precious beyond measure. In our modern world, we turn a handle and clean water flows endlessly. We fill bathtubs without thinking, let the shower run while we soap our hair, brush our teeth under a steady stream. We waste more water in a single morning routine than many biblical families saw in a week. Water in ancient Palestine came from wells, springs, or cisterns that collected rainwater. Every drop was carried by hand, usually by women, in heavy clay jars balanced on heads or hips. Imagine walking half a mile or more in the blazing sun, then carrying 40 pounds of water back home, knowing that precious liquid had to last for drinking, cooking, and yes, washing, though washing came last on the priority list. The wealthy might have servants to fetch water, or homes built near springs, but for most people, water was a daily challenge. You didn't splash it freely. You measured it, saved it, used it carefully. A full-body wash was a luxury reserved for special occasions, festivals, or the weekly Sabbath preparation. Most daily cleaning happened with what they called ablutions, small, careful washings of hands, face, and feet. Picture a clay basin, shallow and wide, filled with perhaps a cup or two of water. This had to suffice for a family's morning routine. Hands first, because you ate with them. Face next, because dignity mattered. Feet last, because they bore the dust and grime of unpaved roads. The water itself wasn't always clean by our standards. Wells could become contaminated. Cisterns grew stagnant, and the pottery vessels used for storage weren't exactly sterile. Many people drank wine or fermented beverages, not just for pleasure, but because they were often safer than water. The alcohol killed bacteria that the ancients couldn't see but somehow understood made them sick. And then there was soap, or rather, the lack of it. True soap, made from fats and lye, wasn't common in biblical times. Instead, people used what they could find. Certain plants produce soapy substances when crushed. Soapwort, for instance, created a frothy lather that could clean skin and fabric. Clay from particular regions had cleansing properties. Wood ash, when mixed with animal fat, produced a harsh but effective cleanser. Imagine trying to wash your hair with crushed plant roots, or scrubbing your skin with clay and hoping it would lift away the day's accumulation of sweat, dust, and grime. Your hands would be rough, your skin often irritated, and the process would take time and effort that our modern bodies, pampered by gentle cleansers and conditioners, can barely comprehend. For most people, a weekly wash was ambitious. Daily bathing was unheard of, except among the very wealthy, and even then, it was more about ritual than cleanliness. The wealthy might have bronze basins, servants to heat water, perfumed oils to mask odours, but even they lived in a world where being truly clean was a temporary state at best. Children grew up understanding that their bodies would smell. Adults accepted that their neighbours smelled too. It wasn't considered disgusting or shameful because it was simply universal. The human nose adapted, as noses do, to the constant presence of body odour, unwashed hair, and the general mustiness of people who worked hard in hot climates, with limited access to cleaning supplies. Women had additional challenges. Menstruation in biblical times meant 7 days of ritual uncleanness, but it also meant 7 days of dealing with natural processes, using nothing but cloth rags that had to be washed and reused. Childbirth meant weeks of recovery without proper sanitation, relying on herbs and hope to prevent infection. Hair care was particularly problematic. Long hair was often seen as beautiful, especially on women, but washing it required significant amounts of water, time, and effort. Many people simply brushed or combed their hair regularly to distribute natural oils and remove dirt, but actual washing might happen only a few times a year. Olive oil was sometimes rubbed into hair and scalp, both to condition and to control lice and other parasites. Speaking of parasites, they were constant companions. Lice, fleas, and other tiny creatures made themselves at home in human hair and clothing. This wasn't a sign of particular dirtiness. It was simply a fact of life. Even wealthy people dealt with insects. Combs made from bone or wood were essential tools, not just for styling, but for literally picking bugs out of hair. Clothing presented its own hygiene challenges. Most people owned very few garments, perhaps 2 or 3 robes or tunics at most. These had to last for years, through all seasons, all weather, all activities. Washing clothes was a major undertaking that required significant amounts of water, soap substitutes, and time. The process involved carrying heavy, wet fabric to rivers or streams, beating it against rocks, scrubbing it with abrasive substances, then laying it out to dry in the sun. This happened perhaps once a month for most garments, more often for underclothes if people were fortunate enough to own them. The rest of the time, clothes simply accumulated odours, stains, and wear. Imagine putting on the same robe day after day, feeling it grow stiff with dried sweat, seeing the fabric darken with accumulated grime, knowing that everyone around you was doing exactly the same thing because there was no alternative. The wealthy might have more clothes to rotate between, but even they lived in a world where fresh, clean clothing was a rare luxury. Personal scent was managed not through elimination, but through masking. People used oils, herbs, and spices to cover natural body odours. Frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and other aromatics were rubbed into skin or sewn into small pouches and worn as jewellery. The goal wasn't to smell like nothing. It was to smell like something pleasant that could overpower the underlying reality of unwashed humanity. Dental care existed, but barely. People cleaned their teeth with frayed twigs, rough cloth, or their fingers. Some ground herbs or salt to scrub away food particles, but true dental hygiene was limited. Most adults expected to lose teeth as they aged, not from neglect, but simply because the tools and knowledge to maintain dental health didn't exist. Bad breath was as universal as body odor. People chewed herbs, spices, or tree resins to freshen their breath temporarily, but chronic dental problems, limited food variety, and digestive issues meant that pleasant breath was unusual enough to be noteworthy. The wealthy had advantages, certainly. They could afford more water, better oils, servants to help with washing, cleaner living spaces. But even kings and queens lived in a world without running water, without antibacterial soap, without deodorant or shampoo, or any of the hundreds of products we consider essential for basic cleanliness. Palace life in biblical times included servants whose entire job was managing water, heating it in bronze vessels over fires, carrying it to private chambers, disposing of used washwater. The wealthy might bathe more often, perhaps every few days, and their clothes were changed and cleaned more frequently. But even the most privileged person in ancient Israel lived with a level of dirt and odor that would shock us today. Public bathhouses existed in some larger cities, influenced by Greek and Roman culture, but they were rare and often associated with foreign customs that devout Jews avoided. Most bathing happened in private, in homes, using simple basins and minimal water. Women's beauty routines existed, but they were nothing like our modern understanding of cosmetics and skincare. Beauty preparations were made from available materials. Coal made from ground minerals to darken eyes, henna to stain nails and hair, crushed berries for lip colour, oils to soften skin. These weren't applied over clean, well-moisturised faces, but over skin that had been washed perhaps days ago with harsh, homemade cleansers. The result was a kind of layered approach to personal maintenance. Natural oils, accumulated dirt, perfumed substances, and cosmetics all mixed together on skin and hair that was cleaned infrequently and with primitive methods. People looked put together by the standards of their time, but those standards were very different from ours. And yet, somehow, life went on. People fell in love, built families, created art, worshipped, celebrated. They found ways to feel attractive and dignified within the constraints of their world. They developed social norms that made their level of cleanliness acceptable and even pleasant within their community. As we drift deeper into this ancient world, let your modern assumptions about cleanliness fade away like water soaking into thirsty earth. Tomorrow, we'll explore more about how people managed these challenges, how they stayed healthy despite limited hygiene, and what daily life really looked like when staying clean was a constant struggle against heat, dust, and scarcity. For now, rest in the knowledge that humanity has always found ways to care for itself, to maintain dignity and beauty even under the most challenging circumstances. The people of Bible times weren't dirty by choice or ignorance. They were simply doing their best with the resources they had, just as we all do. Sleep well, knowing that your morning shower awaits, that clean clothes hang in your closet, that soap and shampoo stand ready to serve you. These simple luxuries would have seemed like miracles to our ancient ancestors, gifts from heaven itself. Let your breathing settle even deeper now, like dust finding its way into the cracks of ancient stone. We're going to continue our journey into this world where cleanliness was earned, not assumed, where every drop of water carried weight, and where the human body was something to be managed rather than pampered. Picture, if you will, a typical morning in ancient Jerusalem, perhaps during the reign of King Hezekiah, around 700 BCE. The rooster hasn't yet announced the dawn, but the household is stirring. In the small stone-walled room where a family of 6 sleeps on simple mats. The air is thick with the accumulated breath and warmth of bodies pressed close together for safety and heat. The mother rises first, as mothers always do. Her feet touch the cool stone floor, and she wraps her outer robe around shoulders that haven't felt water in 3 days. There's no rushing to a bathroom, no quick splash of face with running water. Instead, she moves quietly to the corner, where a small clay pitcher sits beside a shallow basin, both precious vessels that represent the family's entire washing station. The water in that pitcher was drawn yesterday evening from the community well, a journey of nearly a quarter-mile that her teenage daughter made with other girls from their neighborhood. The water is tepid now, having sat through the night, and there's perhaps 2 cups of it remaining after yesterday's cooking and drinking needs were met. She pours a small amount into the basin, maybe an ounce or 2, and begins her ablutions. First, she cups the water in her hands and brings it to her face, feeling the slight coolness against skin that has grown accustomed to its own oils and the fine layer of dust that settles on everything in this climate. She rubs gently, not with soap, for there is none, but simply with the friction of her palms against her cheeks and forehead. Her hair, dark and long as was proper for a married woman, hasn't been truly washed in over a week. It's held back with a simple cloth band, and she runs her fingers through it, feeling the weight of accumulated oils that have both protected and burdened the strands. Once a month, perhaps twice if water is plentiful, she will take the time to truly cleanse her hair, but today is not that day. Her husband stirs, and she prepares for his morning washing. Men, too, were expected to maintain basic cleanliness, though their routines were even simpler. A splash of water on the face, a rubbing of hands to remove the night's accumulation of oils and any food residue from the evening meal eaten with fingers. The beard, if he wore one as most men did, would be combed with a simple wooden comb, the same comb used by every member of the family. The children wake slowly, and each in turn approaches the basin for their portion of the morning water. The youngest, barely walking, is wiped down with a damp cloth. The older children, perhaps 6 and 8 years old, have learned to make the most of a few drops of water, splashing their faces and rubbing their hands clean with the efficiency born of necessity. By the time the family has finished their ablutions, the water in the basin has become murky with the accumulated dirt and oils of 5 people. This water won't be wasted, though. It will be used to dampen the floor for sweeping to settle dust, or perhaps to water a small herb garden that provides some of the family's seasoning and medicine. The children dress in the same tunics they wore yesterday, and the day before that. These simple garments, woven from wool or linen depending on the family's means, are their daily uniform. The fabric has grown soft with wear and washing, but also thin in places, stained permanently with the evidence of meals, work, and life itself. For the mother, dressing means wrapping herself in layers that will protect her from sun, dust, and the judgmental eyes of neighbors, while still allowing her to work efficiently. Her undergarment, if she has one, is a simple shift that absorbs sweat and provides a barrier between her skin and the outer robe. This shift might be washed weekly if water allows, but the outer garments are cleaned much less frequently. The father prepares for his work as a potter, knowing that by evening his hands will be stained with clay, his clothes dusty with the fine particles of his trade. There's no point in starting the day perfectly clean when cleanliness is so temporary and so difficult to maintain. Instead, he focuses on being clean enough, presentable enough, dignified enough to move through his community without shame. As the family breaks their fast with bread, olives, and perhaps some dried fruit, they eat with hands that have been washed but not sanitized in any modern sense. Germs and bacteria, unknown to them, transfer freely from hand to mouth, from person to person, from food to fingers. Yet somehow, life continues. Bodies adapt, immune systems strengthen through constant exposure, and people live full lives despite what we would consider alarming hygiene conditions. The morning meal finished, Each family member begins their day with the understanding that they will grow progressively dirtier as the hours pass. The father will breathe clay dust, handle rough tools, sweat in the heat of his workshop. The mother will tend fires, prepare food, clean house with methods that spread as much dust as they remove. The children will play in streets that serve as thoroughfares for people, animals, and waste. By midday, when the sun reaches its most punishing intensity, everyone seeks shade and rest. This is when the wise take time for additional washing, if water permits. A damp cloth across the brow, a splash of precious water on wrists and neck, a moment to shake dust from clothing and hair. These small, refreshing acts are luxuries that require planning and conservation. Afternoon brings more work, more accumulation of the day's grime. Women gathering at the well for evening water might pause to rinse dusty feet, to splash water on faces reddened by sun and wind. Men returning from fields or workshops might stop at a stream if one is available, rolling up their sleeves to wash hands and forearms, stained with the evidence of their labour. But for most people, most days, the concept of feeling truly clean is foreign. Bodies adapt to their own sense, to the weight of oils in hair, to the feeling of fabric that has absorbed days of wear. What seems unbearable to our modern sensibilities becomes simply normal, the baseline from which all other experiences are measured. Evening brings the day's most thorough cleaning ritual, though thorough is a relative term. Before the evening meal, religious law requires the washing of hands, but this washing uses minimal water and serves more ritual than hygienic purposes. The act symbolizes preparation for receiving God's blessing on the food, but it doesn't eliminate the day's accumulation of dirt and bacteria. Children are checked for obvious dirt, their faces wiped if water allows. Hair is combed or brushed to remove the day's collection of dust and debris. Feet, which have walked on unpaved roads shared with animals, are given attention if the family can spare the water. But full-body cleanliness remains elusive, a goal rather than an achievement. As darkness falls and oil lamps flicker to life, families gather in their small homes, carrying the scents of their day with them. Wood smoke from cooking fires, sweat from honest labour, the mustiness of clothing worn repeatedly, the earthy smell of hair that hasn't seen soap in weeks. These scents layer and mingle in the enclosed space, creating an aromatic signature that would assault modern noses, but which represents home and safety to those who live within it. The wealthy live differently, certainly. In the palaces of Jerusalem, servants heat water in bronze vessels over carefully tended fires. Royal baths, rare and precious events, might involve multiple servants, perfumed oils, and amounts of water that would supply a common family for a week. But even royalty cannot escape the fundamental reality of their time. True cleanliness is temporary, expensive, and often impractical. Queen mothers and princesses might bathe weekly, their servants massaging oils into skin and hair, using imported soaps made from plant ashes and animal fats. Their clothes are changed more frequently, washed by servants who beat them against stones in streams outside the city. But even these privileged women live with a level of accumulated grime that would horrify us today. Palace servants, meanwhile, live lives barely better than common people when it comes to hygiene. They might have access to leftover bathwater from their employers, or the privilege of washing in the same streams used for royal laundry, but their daily reality involves the same struggles with limited water, harsh cleansing agents, and the constant battle against dust, sweat, and accumulated oils. The contrast between rich and poor in biblical times wasn't about being clean versus dirty. It was about degrees of dirtiness and the frequency of attempts at cleanliness. The wealthy might wash every few days instead of weekly, might have access to better oils and perfumes to mask odours, might own more clothing to rotate between washings. But everyone lived in the same dusty, pre-industrial world where cleanliness was a luxury, not a given. And in this world of limited hygiene, social customs developed that we might find strange today. People stood closer together because everyone smelled, so individual scents were less noticeable. Greeting customs involved less physical contact, partly for cleanliness, but also for practical reasons. Strong perfumes and oils weren't just luxury items, they were necessities for social interaction. Let this ancient world settle around you now like a worn blanket, familiar and comforting despite its challenges. These people, our ancestors in faith and humanity, lived full, rich lives within the constraints of their time. They loved, laughed, created and worshipped while carrying the accumulated grime of their daily existence. Tomorrow, we'll explore more of their world, the ingenious solutions they developed for staying as clean as possible, the social structures that made their level of hygiene acceptable, and the ways they maintained dignity and beauty despite challenges we can barely imagine. For now, rest in the knowledge that cleanliness, like so many things we take for granted, is a gift of our modern world. Sleep peacefully, knowing that your ancestors survived and thrived with far less, that human resilience and adaptability are written into your very DNA. Close your eyes deeper now, and let us drift toward the end of our ancient journey. Feel yourself sinking into the soft darkness of a biblical evening, where oil lamps cast dancing shadows on stone walls, and the day's heat finally begins to lift from tired shoulders. We've walked through their mornings, their daily struggles with water and soap that barely existed. Now let's witness how these ancient people found moments of grace within their limitations, how they carved out dignity and even beauty from the harsh realities of their world. Picture a wedding feast in ancient Galilee, perhaps the kind that Jesus himself might have attended. Despite the limited hygiene we've explored, this is still a celebration, a moment when families stretch their resources to honor love and new beginnings. The bride has spent days preparing, using every precious drop of water her family can spare. Her hair has been washed with plant-based cleansers, rinsed with water perfumed with rose petals and herbs. Olive oil mixed with precious spices has been massaged into her skin, not just for beauty, but to create a barrier against the dust and heat of the celebration. Her garments, perhaps the finest her family owns, have been carefully cleaned and aired, scented with frankincense and myrrh. But even on this most important day, she carries the reality of her time. The oils in her hair will attract dust within hours. Her carefully washed skin will begin to accumulate the fine grit that settles on everything in this climate. Her beautiful clothes will absorb the smoke from cooking fires, the sweat of celebration, the inevitable stains of a feast eaten with hands and shared among many. The guests, too, have made their best efforts. Men have trimmed their beards with bronze razors. Women have braided flowers into hair that hasn't been washed in days, but has been carefully combed and oiled. Children have been scrubbed as thoroughly as precious water allows, their faces shining with the temporary cleanliness that mothers achieve through determination and very little soap. As the celebration continues into the night, these attempts at cleanliness begin to fade. Sweat mingles with perfumed oils, dust settles on carefully arranged hair, wine stains appear on festival garments. But no one minds, because everyone understands. This is the rhythm of life in their world, the constant cycle of attempting cleanliness and accepting its temporary nature. In the temple courts of Jerusalem, priests maintained higher standards of ritual purity, but even their cleanliness was relative. The bronze laver where they washed hands and feet held water that was changed regularly but wasn't pure by our standards. Their linen garments were washed more frequently than common clothes, but still accumulated the oils and odors of bodies that bathed infrequently. The high priest, on the Day of Atonement, underwent elaborate purification rituals that involved multiple washings, but even he began and ended as a man of his time, someone whose daily reality included the accumulated grime that was simply part of human existence in the ancient world. Women gathering at wells didn't just come for water, they came for community, for the shared understanding that everyone faced the same daily battles with cleanliness. They might share remedies, plant-based cleansers discovered by trial and error, techniques for making soap from ash and fat, methods for keeping hair manageable with minimal washing. These well-side conversations were filled with practical wisdom passed down through generations. Which herbs best masked body odor when rubbed into skin? How to remove stains from a fabric using clay and patience? Which time of day offered the best water, before too many people and animals had stirred up the sediment? Mothers taught daughters not just how to manage households, but how to maintain dignity within the constraints of their world, how to braid hair to hide the oils that couldn't be washed away, how to layer garments so that the cleanest pieces showed while the dirtiest remained hidden, how to use precious perfumes strategically, applying them to pulse points where they would last longest and mask the most. The sick presented special challenges in this world of limited hygiene. Caring for someone with fever or disease meant using water for comfort when it was desperately needed for other purposes. It meant washing soiled bedding by hand with harsh plant-based soaps that left hands cracked and raw. It meant accepting that recovery often depended more on rest and prayer than on the kind of cleanliness we associate with healing. Yet somehow, people did recover. Bodies adapted to their environment, immune systems strengthened by constant exposure to bacteria and germs that would terrify us today. Life expectancy was shorter, certainly, and many illnesses that we easily treat proved fatal. But within their world, their level of hygiene was sufficient for survival, even if it seems inadequate to us. As seasons changed, so did the challenges of staying clean. Winter brought different problems than summer. Cold weather meant that water froze in storage jars, that heating it became more expensive and difficult, that heavy robes worn for warmth became impossible to wash regularly. People layered clothing for months, living with the accumulated mustiness of wool and linen that saw little washing until spring. Summer brought its own trials. The relentless heat made any fabric feel oppressive, but modesty required covering. Sweat became a constant companion, mixing with dust to create a paste that clung to skin and clothing. Water became even more precious as wells ran low, and the journey to fetch it became longer and more arduous. But in every season, people found ways to adapt. They learned which fabrics breathed better in heat, which oils protected skin in cold. They developed traditions around the few times when full bathing was possible, making these occasions into celebrations of renewal and community. Religious festivals often coincided with these rare bathing opportunities. The preparations for Passover, for instance, included not just spiritual cleansing, but physical washing that represented a fresh start. Families would spend precious resources on water and soap, understanding that cleanliness and holiness were connected in ways both practical and symbolic. Children grew up understanding that their bodies would smell, that their clothes would accumulate stains, that perfect cleanliness was not a realistic goal. But they also learned that dignity didn't depend on being perfectly clean. They saw their parents maintain pride and self-respect despite limitations we can barely imagine. Young girls learned to braid flowers into oily hair, to use coloured clays as cosmetics over skin that hadn't been thoroughly washed in days. Young boys learned that strength and honour mattered more than cleanliness, that a man's worth was measured by his work and character rather than his appearance. As our journey through this ancient world draws to a close, let yourself feel the profound gratitude that comes from understanding what came before us. These people, our ancestors in faith and humanity, lived with grace and dignity despite challenges that would overwhelm us today. They found beauty in small things, the shimmer of oil in freshly combed hair, the clean scent of herbs rubbed into skin, the temporary freshness that came from splashing face and hands with precious water. They understood that cleanliness was not about perfection, but about making the best of what they had. Their love stories unfolded despite body odour and unwashed hair. Their friendships deepened around shared understanding of life's difficulties. Their children grew strong and happy despite living with a level of dirt that would alarm us today. They proved that human dignity and joy don't depend on perfect hygiene, that life can be rich and meaningful, even when lived within severe constraints. As you drift towards sleep tonight, surrounded by the luxuries they could never imagine, remember them with tenderness. Remember the mother who used her family's last cup of clean water to wash her baby's face. Remember the father who walked miles to find a stream where he could rinse the day's work from his hands. Remember the children who played and laughed despite wearing clothes that hadn't been washed in weeks. They were not dirty people living dirty lives. They were human beings doing their best with the resources available to them, finding dignity and beauty and meaning within limitations that tested their ingenuity every single day. They laid the foundation for everything that followed, including the abundance of cleanliness we enjoy today. Rest now in the knowledge that every hot shower you take, every bar of soap you use, every clean towel that embraces you represents thousands of years of human innovation and progress. Rest knowing that your ancestors survived and thrived with so much less, that their resilience flows in your very veins. Let their world fade gently around you like morning mist, carrying with it the scent of olive oil and herbs, the sound of water being drawn from ancient wells, the sight of families gathering around simple meals eaten with unwashed but grateful hands. Sleep peacefully, clean and comfortable, blessed with luxuries that would have seemed miraculous to those who came before us. Sleep, knowing that their struggles paved the way for your comfort, that their dignity in the face of hardship teaches us something profound about what it means to be human. The ancient world settles into silence now, its people at rest after long days of work and worry and small victories over the eternal challenge of staying clean in a world that was anything but. Their stories are told, their struggles honoured, their humanity celebrated. Sweet dreams, dear listener. May you wake tomorrow with new appreciation for the simple miracle of running water, clean clothes and soap that lathers easily in your grateful hands.